The jungle is thick and the fog limits your view, but you can still hear enemy gunfire approaching closer and closer. You look for help, but most of your team has disappeared, and the remaining few have little ammo to share. Panic takes over when you realize that there is no escape from the surrounding rebel forces, until you hear a faint radio transmission in the distance. Suddenly, a large gunship reaches through the sky like a beacon of hope. Rebel infantry is shot down, tanks are blown up, and even anti-aircraft defenses prove useless against this mysterious aircraft. The fog begins to clear, and as you look out into the battlefield, you are relieved to see an impossible victory. The faint radio signals again, and with all of your focus on its American voice,
Rescue return to Central.
you discover that the unstoppable gunship was the legendary Angel of Death. Lasting nearly 20 years since the 1950s, the rivalry between the US and its communist enemies intensified an already destructive war in Vietnam. When the US fought, they often flew to the skies and proved their military might in the air, but this wasn't enough. So the US Air Force rebuilt their aircrafts with the ambition of commanding battle-hardened gunships. Their first design was the Douglas AC-130, and it was mounted with 3 controllable miniguns. It unleashed 100 suppressive rounds per second while circling a target for hours. At the same time, ground troops would push further into enemy territory. Even though this was a completely new strategy, the gunship became a huge success and was even nicknamed Puff the Magic Dragon by troops because it was as tough as a dragon. This was only the beginning, because after significant improvements, Puff the Magic Dragon transformed into the AC-130A, a prototype that would eventually be feared as the Angel of Death. The enormous gunship flew as fast as 300 miles per hour, with a 1,300-mile range, and it could be armed with 7.62mm miniguns, 20 to 25mm Gatling rotary cannons, and 40mm autocannons. If the enemy saw the AC-130 approaching, they would see a menacing, flying war machine that had more speed, stamina, height, and firepower than any aircraft they would have seen before. However, time was running thin, and the pressure of the war grew heavier. More American citizens joined the anti-war protests. Allied troops suffered greater casualties, and the US needed to boost army morale while striking fear into the enemy. Near the Ho Chi Minh Trail of Vietnam, ground troops were in close contact with hostile forces. However, the night made it difficult to navigate a terrain that the enemy was already used to. They needed support, so they called in the 16th Special Operations Squadron. Not one, not two, but an entire formation of AC-130 gunships came to the rescue. To search for the enemies, the Angel of Death used its night vision telescope to see through the dark. But heavy rain and fog still made it difficult to see, so they used their infrared device to detect enemy heat sources through the harsh weather. Intel and tactics were communicated between the land and air units, and once enemy locations were revealed, firework-like flares dropped from the Angel to light up the battlefield for ground troops to see. Hostilities were then visually targeted, and with the miniguns and rotary cannons loaded, a barrage of rounds were fired. Intense fighting continued. Targets were hunted by the Angels and the troops charged forward. The battle was about to be won. However, the Angels noticed something odd in the jungle. With its high-tech electromagnetic sensors, it detected signals that suggested hidden vehicle engines. Without hesitation, the Angels pointed their autocannons at seemingly harmless trees, when suddenly, convoys of enemy trucks drove out to ambush the ground troops. But it was too late. Within seconds, the trucks exploded under Angel artillery, and finally, the area had been secured. After the war ended, the Angels had destroyed over 10,000 enemy trucks and supported many conflicts throughout Vietnam. Realizing its success, the US Air Force developed the Angels into a specialized fleet, which would be deployed to nearly every US fight. Invasions in Grenada and Panama saw the Angels destroy headquarters, bombard command and control facilities, and recapture international airports. Wars in Afghanistan and Iraq had the Angels obliterate Taliban and Al-Qaeda strongholds. And when Paris was attacked by the ISIL terrorist group, the Angels retaliated against hundreds of their oil tankers, wells, refineries, pipelines, and trucks, which crippled over 90% of their oil production. They were on a streak of success, and it didn't seem like anything could stop them, until a tragic mistake years later. During the Middle East invasion, terrorist activity was again identified in Afghanistan. In 5 attacks, the new AC-130U Spooky 2 gunships concentrated their firepower at the location with a 105mm howitzer, capable of obliterating modern tanks and buildings. But the pilots seemed apprehensive in this operation, and cockpit recordings reportedly reveal that they even questioned the command. So, what was the problem? Before they were ordered to stop, 42 were killed and 30 more were injured. And as the dust settled, the debris revealed the remains of a hospital. It was the only medical facility around, and the only trauma center in northeastern Afghanistan. Medical staff, patients, and family members were among the casualties. Some were burned to death in their beds, and some were left to die in the middle of an operation when staff were forced to evacuate. It is unclear what caused the mistake. Some blamed the Angel equipment and the lack of hospital signs, while others blamed the negligence of the crew and its commanding general. Despite this tragic incident, the AC-130 gunships continue to be deployed to this day all over the world.
Vision 3 is command.
The Angels have been in service for over 50 years, and although they have been upgraded over time, the Air Force is seriously reconsidering their future use because of its high signature and low airspeed in modern warfare. Still, the Air Force is scheduled to deploy their new lineup of AC-130J Ghost Riders in a few years, which can fly for longer and is equipped with precision-guided Griffin missiles. There are even plans to install laser weapons for precise attacks, and disposable drones for greater surveillance. Whatever future holds for the Angel of Death, it is no doubt that it has shaped the history of global conflict. With all the possibilities of gunship technology, the AC-130 is just one of many that evoke infinite wonder. We hope you enjoyed our look into the infamous Angel of Death gunship. Do you think the US would have won their wars without it? Share your thoughts, suggestions, and questions in the comments below. Interesting new content like this is uploaded every week, so be sure to like and subscribe to see more of Infinite Wonder.